I sat still on our living room couch, my thumb going through text after text. Every message hurt. Miss you already. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Last night was amazing. Still can't believe we have to hide like this. After her wedding, we won't have to sneak around anymore. My sister and my fiancé, my sister and Noah, Madison and Noah. The phone buzzed while Noah was in the shower. I looked at it without thinking. We never hid our phones from each other. 3 years together had built that trust. Now that trust was gone, his phone sitting on our IKEA coffee table, next to yesterday's mail and 2 half-empty coffee mugs. The bathroom door opened down the hall. Steam came out with the smell of Noah's fancy cedar body wash, the one I got him for Christmas, the same Christmas when I guess he and Madison connected. I didn't look up when he walked into the living room, hair still wet. I just held out his phone, screen lit up. "What's this?" His voice had that casual tone he used when buying time. "You tell me." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "You left your phone unlocked," Madison texted. Noah's face drained of color. He didn't look at the screen. He didn't need to. "Liv, I can explain. You're sleeping with my sister." The words tasted acrid, like something burned beyond recognition. "For how long?" He sank into the armchair across from me, not beside me. I noted that distance, filed it away as evidence. "Since December." He rubbed his palms against his jeans. "But it wasn't planned. We never meant—" "December," I cut him off. 4 months. We've been planning our wedding for 4 months while you've been—" I couldn't finish the sentence. The apartment felt cramped. This space we'd decorated together, the framed photo of our engagement on the bookshelf, the throw pillows we'd argued over at Target, it all felt wrong now. "We tried to fight it," Noah said, leaning forward. "We really did. It just happened." "Things don't just happen, Noah. You make choices." I stood up, needing to move, to put physical space between us. "Does she know you proposed to me in front of her? That she helped you pick out the ring? Liv, please." "Did you laugh about it? About stupid trusting Olivia?" "No, it wasn't like that." He stood too, taking a step toward me. I backed away. "We didn't want to hurt you." I laughed, a harsh sound that scraped my throat raw. "Then you've failed spectacularly." The rest of the evening blurred into fragments. Noah trying to explain. Me packing an overnight bag. The slam of our apartment door as I left. The text to my friend Jenna, "Can I stay with you tonight?" The cool spring air on my tear-streaked face as I walked 6 blocks to her apartment. That night on Jenna's pull-out couch, sleep came in fitful bursts between waves of nausea. Each time I closed my eyes, images flashed behind my eyelids. Noah and Madison at Christmas dinner, their hands brushing as they passed the potatoes. Noah checking his phone during date nights. Madison asking detailed questions about our wedding plans. How had I missed it? Morning didn't make anything better. I just felt empty and awful. I sat at Jenna's kitchen table, staring at my untouched coffee, when my phone buzzed with Madison's name. "I'm outside Jenna's. Please talk to me." "You don't have to see her," Jenna said, reading over my shoulder. "Yes, I do." I stood up, muscles protesting after a night on the too soft mattress. "This needs to be finished." Madison waited on the stoop, arms wrapped around herself, even though the weather was mild. Her eyes were puffy and red-rimmed, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked young and scared and nothing like the sister who'd stolen my fiancé. "Liv, don't call me that. Only people I trusted used that nickname." She flinched. "Olivia, then. Can we walk?" We moved silently down the block, past brownstones with window boxes full of early spring flowers. It felt wrong that everything looked so normal when my whole life had just turned upside down. "I didn't mean for this to happen," Madison finally said, voice cracking. If you say it just happened one more time, I swear I'll scream right here on the street." I stopped walking to face her. "You're sleeping with my fiancé, planning a future with him, behind my back." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I know it's unforgivable." "Yes." The word came out flat. "It is." "We were going to tell you after what? After the wedding? Were you going to let me marry him knowing he was in love with you?" She looked down at the sidewalk. "We never got that far in planning. We just knew we couldn't hurt you yet." "So thoughtful of you both." A jogger passed us, staying far away from our obvious confrontation. Madison wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. My sweater, I realized suddenly, one she'd borrowed months ago and never returned. "I love him, Olivia." Her voice was small but certain. "And he loves me." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. Then you deserve each other. I turned and walked back to Jenna's apartment. Madison called after me once, then fell silent. I didn't look back. By noon, I had a plan. By 3, I had emptied our joint bank account of my portion of the savings. By 6, I had a one-way ticket to Portland, Maine for the following morning. That evening, I returned to our apartment while Noah was at work. The place didn't feel like home anymore. I quickly went through the rooms, packing only what mattered: clothes, toiletries, and the painting supplies I'd put away when my corporate job got too busy. I left my key on the kitchen counter beside a note with just one line: I hope she's worth it. The engagement ring was the last thing. I'd left it on the bathroom counter the night before. Couldn't stand wearing it after what I found out. Now Noah's text insisted I take it. It's yours. Sell it if you need money. The big diamond sparkled as I picked it up. This ring used to mean something good, but now just felt like a payoff. I stuck it in my pocket anyway. He was right about one thing. I might need the money. My phone kept buzzing with texts and calls all evening. Noah, Madison, my mother asking why Madison was so upset. Friends checking if I was okay after not hearing from me all day. I ignored them all. Instead, I looked for apartments in Portland, applied for waitressing jobs online, and deleted all my social media accounts. The train left Union Station at 6:42 the next morning. I got a window seat in a half-empty car, put my suitcase overhead, and kept my backpack with my valuables close. As the train moved away, Chicago got smaller in the distance, sunlight bouncing off the glass buildings I used to love. My phone still had my old number. I scrolled through contacts one last time, memorizing a few important ones. Then I went to my carrier's website and asked for a number change. Right away. The confirmation came through in minutes. Nobody could reach me now. It got dark as the train kept going east. Cities and towns passed by my window. The dining car had so-so pasta that I hardly tasted. Back at my seat, I put my head against the cold window and watched everything go by. By midnight, most people had turned off their lights. The car was quiet except for the clacking sound of the train and some muffled announcements. Sitting there between Chicago and Maine, between my old life and whatever came next, I made myself a promise. I would start over completely. Not the Olivia who got betrayed, not the Olivia who loved and lost, but someone new, someone stronger, someone who would never again mistake blind trust for love. The engagement ring felt heavy in my pocket, like a reminder of what was to come. The engagement ring fetched $4,000 at a pawn shop in downtown Portland. Less than I'd hoped, but enough for first and last month's rent on a small apartment above Lighthouse Books on Market Street. The remaining cash went into a lockbox under my bed, emergency money for when I started to weaken and Chicago started calling me back. 3 months passed in a blur of gray mornings and endless shifts at the Harbor Light Diner. I'd arrived in Portland with nothing but determination and spite, applying for jobs within hours of stepping off the train. Kelly, the diner's owner, hired me after a 5-minute interview, more out of pity than need. "You look like you could use a break," she'd said, sliding the employment forms across the counter. She didn't ask why I'd come to Portland, and I didn't volunteer the information. My apartment was both a hideout and a trap, just a single bedroom with a sloped ceiling and squeaky floors. I barely used the tiny kitchen, mostly eating diner leftovers and delivery pizza. In the small living room, I kept the curtains closed all the time, not wanting anyone to see inside. I picked up double shifts whenever I could, getting to the kitchen before sunrise and staying till the end to make good tips from the fishermen and dock workers. Being super tired helped. When I was worn out, I couldn't think about stuff I wanted to forget. I looked forward to sleeping more than anything. I'd just fall into bed with my work clothes still on, sometimes with my shoes still on my feet. When I slept, I didn't have to keep reliving how everything fell apart. I didn't have to be Olivia Brooks, the woman who never saw the cheating until it showed up in a text to her fiancé. "You should get out more," Kelly said one evening as I counted my tips at the counter. The diner was empty except for a couple lingering over coffee in the corner booth. "There's a festival on the pier this weekend. Live music, local artists." I tucked the bills into my wallet. "I've got laundry to catch up on." Kelly leaned against the counter, looking at me like she could see right through me. "Been here 3 months and your uniform's the only thing I've seen you wear. You running from something or someone?" The question hit too close. I started fixing the salt and pepper shakers. Just needed a change. She didn't press further. Well, if you change your mind, I'll be there with the booth. My nephew's band is playing. I nodded, knowing I wouldn't go. Festivals meant crowds, crowds meant questions, and questions meant lies. I'd gotten pretty good at making up a past that didn't include a sister or a fiancé or a life I left behind in Chicago. It was easier to just blend in, as the quiet waitress nobody really paid attention to. Tuesday was my day off. I spent it like all the others, sleeping late, dodging calls from my parents who somehow still reached me, even with my new number. How did they find it? And sort of cleaning the apartment. The bookstore downstairs was closed on Tuesdays, which made the building super quiet. I was shoving a stack of unpacked boxes deeper into the closet when one fell over, spilling everything across the floor. Art supplies, brushes, tubes of paint, sketch pads. I'd thrown them in boxes back in Chicago without really thinking, grabbing them along with clothes and toiletries when I rushed to leave. I ran my hand over a palette crusty with old paint. When was the last time I'd used these? Before getting engaged, for sure. Before the promotion that took over my evenings and weekends. Before I talked myself into believing being practical mattered more than doing what I loved. Outside, rain hit the window in random patterns. I walked over and pulled back the curtains for the first time in weeks. Market Street was right below. People hurrying under umbrellas, shop lights shining in puddles. A woman laughed as a man pulled her under an awning. An old man walked a small dog wearing a yellow raincoat. I suddenly grabbed the small table from the kitchen and put it under the window. I emptied the box, setting out brushes, paints, and a canvas I'd never used. The blank white canvas just sat there, making me feel guilty. What would I even paint? I hadn't felt anything worth showing in months. That first try was ugly. Angry red slashes across a black background, no shape or point except to let stuff out. I painted until my arm hurt, until red and black mixed into something messy. When I finished, I put it against the wall and looked at it, feeling both embarrassed and proud at the same time. The next day, I woke up before my alarm. For the first time since moving to Portland, I wanted to do more than just get through the day. After my shift, I stopped at an art supply store and spent $30 I couldn't really afford on new brushes and a proper easel. That night, I painted what I saw from my window, streetlights making yellow spots on wet pavement, dark outlines of buildings against the night sky. It wasn't good, but it was something. "What happened to your hands?" Kelly asked the following morning as I refilled the coffee urns. I looked down at my fingers stained with blues and greens. I was painting. Walls? No, just painting. Art, I guess. The admission felt strange, like revealing a secret. Kelly's eyebrows rose. "Didn't know you were an artist." "I'm not really. I used to be, maybe, before." I stopped, not wanting to open that door. Before what? I busied myself with wiping down the counter. Just before. She didn't push, but later that day, I caught her watching me with a curious look. The next morning, she asked to see my work. "It's not very good," I hedged. "I'll be the judge of that," she said. That evening, she followed me home after our shift ended. My apartment, which had seemed like a refuge that morning, suddenly looked pathetic. The unmade bed visible from the living room, takeout containers stacked by the trash, laundry draped over chairs to dry. Kelly didn't comment on the mess. Her eyes went straight to the paintings leaning against the wall, the angry red and black one, the nighttime street scene, and my latest attempt, the harbor at sunrise, done from memory after an early morning shift. She studied each one in silence, and I fought the urge to explain or apologize. Finally, she picked up the harbor painting. "This one. Can I borrow it?" "What for?" "The diner. Naked walls make people eat faster. Art makes them linger, order dessert." She turned to me. "I'll pay you, of course." I shook my head. "You don't have to do that." "I'm not doing charity, Olivia. I'm doing business." She tucked the painting under her arm. "Paint me 2 more. Harbor scenes. People like local art." After she left, I stood by the window for a long time, looking down at the street. Then I set up a fresh canvas and began to paint. 2 weeks later, 3 of my paintings hung on the diner walls. The first sold within days. A tourist from Boston paid $200 for my view of the lighthouse at dusk. The second sold the following week. Kelly hung the third higher, out of reach. "That one's not for sale," she told a customer who inquired. "That's our Olivia original. She's going to be famous someday." I rolled my eyes when she said it. but felt something warm inside. Pride, maybe, or possibility. "My cousin owns a gift shop on Commercial Street," said a regular customer after studying my newest painting. "She might be interested in displaying some of your work." Word spread. A local coffee shop asked for a series of Portland scenes. A bed and breakfast owner commissioned paintings of nearby beaches. I started keeping a notebook of ideas and observations, the way light hit the water at different times of day, the shapes of boats against the horizon, the texture of fog rolling in from the sea. My apartment got better. The curtains stayed open. I bought proper hangers for my clothes, a plant for the windowsill, and a comfy chair for when I painted. I met my neighbors, Mrs. Chen, who ran the flower shop, some college students, and the bookstore owner who sometimes left me damaged books. One evening, going through the local paper looking for stuff to draw, I saw an ad for a painting workshop at the community center. "All levels welcome," it said. "Materials provided." I thought about it, then circled it with a pen. The idea of painting with strangers made my stomach tight, but I wanted to learn new techniques. I'd been using acrylics, but oils seemed hard. The workshop taught both. The following Tuesday, I walked into the community center holding my sketchbook. The room was already half full. Older folks setting up easels, middle-aged women talking by the supply table, a teenage boy hanging back in the corner. No one looked up when I came in. I picked a spot near the back and started unpacking my brushes. The instructor, a woman with gray hair and paint-covered jeans, called for attention. "Welcome, everyone. I see some familiar faces and some new ones." Her eyes rested briefly on me. "Today we're focusing on light and shadow using still life. Basics first, then we can get fancy." For 2 hours I got caught up in just watching and drawing, how the light bent around a glass bottle, the shadow from a fruit bowl, and the reflection in a metal pitcher. The instructor walked around the room, giving quiet tips and some praise here and there. "Nice brush control," she said, pausing behind me. "You've done this before." I nodded without looking up. "There's another workshop on Thursdays, more advanced. You should come." That night, I slept without my usual tangle of dreams. The next morning, I woke before my alarm, eager to try a technique I'd learned at the workshop. By the end of the week, I'd signed up for both sessions and bought a set of oil paints. Painting didn't erase what happened in Chicago. Madison and Noah still existed in my memory, their betrayal, a fact I couldn't undo. Sometimes I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to text Madison about a funny customer interaction, forgetting for a split second that we were no longer sisters in any way that mattered. Certain songs on the diner's playlist still brought back images of dancing with Noah in our old apartment kitchen. But gradually, those moments became less frequent, less overwhelming. The constant ache that had followed me to Portland began to change, not disappearing entirely, but turning into something I could carry without being crushed by its weight. It became manageable, like a wound slowly scarring over, tender to the touch, but no longer bleeding. 6 months after arriving in Portland, I walked into the Coastal Light Gallery with 3 wrapped canvases tucked under my arm. The bell above the door chimed as I came in. Sunlight came through tall windows, lighting up the white walls and wooden floors. The thick carpet muffled my steps as I walked in. The gallery was empty, except for a man fixing the lighting on a large abstract painting. He turned when he heard the bell, and we just looked at each other. He was tall and skinny, with dark-rimmed glasses and a thoughtful face. Not good-looking like Noah had been, but interesting to look at. "Can I help you?" His voice matched his appearance, quiet, measured. I cleared my throat. "I'm Olivia Brooks. I have paintings for the summer showcase." The words came out more confidently than I felt. 6 months ago, I'd been a waitress with paint-stained hands and wounded pride. Now I was standing in an actual gallery with my work. He looked like he suddenly remembered me. "From Harbor Light Diner." I blinked in surprise. "You've seen my work?" "The harbor at sunset, the lighthouse in fog," he nodded. "Kelly's very proud of her discovery. I'm Ethan Caldwell, the owner." He gestured to my wrapped canvases. "May I?" I handed him the paintings, watching as he carefully unwrapped each one. The first was a scene of fishing boats coming back at dawn, their dark shapes against a sky changing from deep blue to pink. The second showed rain falling on the eastern promenade, with puddles reflecting broken pieces of buildings. The third, my favorite, was the view from my apartment window at night, with bright streetlights dotting the darkness. Ethan looked at each one quietly, his eyes moving across the canvas, noticing details I didn't think anyone else would catch. He spent extra time on the third painting, his finger almost touching the surface, but not quite. "Your use of color tells stories," he said finally. "There's narrative in your brushwork, the way you layer light." He looked up at me. "How long have you been painting?" "All my life." Then I stopped for a few years, then I hesitated, not wanting to dive into my past with a stranger. "I started again when I moved here." Ethan nodded as if I'd explained fully. He carried the paintings to a work table near the back of the gallery. "These will work well in the East Room. The showcase opens Thursday night, 7 to 9. I followed him and checked out the gallery setup. They had smaller pieces near the front door, while the big paintings got whole walls to themselves. The sculptures were placed so you had to walk a certain path through all the rooms. "Will you be there?" he asked, glancing back at me. "At the opening?" "Yes. Artists are expected to attend, mingle, explain their process to potential buyers." My stomach nodded. I'd imagined dropping off my paintings and slipping away, letting the work speak for itself. The thought of standing in a crowded gallery, answering questions about my inspiration, made my palms sweat. "I'm not sure." "Your work deserves your presence," Ethan said simply. "If you're uncomfortable, stay near your paintings. I'll direct interested parties to you." That afternoon ran into evening as Ethan showed me where my paintings would hang and explained the gallery's commission structure. We talked about technique, my preference for acrylics, my attempts with texture and mixed media. He asked questions that made me think, and he really listened to my answers. When I finally left, the sun was setting over the harbor. I walked home slowly, going over our conversation, thinking about the way he'd looked at my paintings, not with the casual appreciation of diner customers, but with genuine understanding. It felt like being seen, really seen, for the first time in months. The showcase opened on a warm June evening. I arrived early, wearing a blue dress I'd bought just for the occasion, my first purchase that wasn't purely practical since coming to Portland. The gallery looked different, with soft lighting and small tables holding wine glasses. My paintings hung on the east wall, their frames catching the last bits of sun through the windows. Ethan showed up beside me, dressed in a white shirt and dark pants, his usual thoughtful expression replaced by something warmer. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," I admitted. "Good. Nerves mean you care." The evening went by in a blur of introductions and unexpected conversations. People asked about my influences, my choice of subject matter, my future plans. I answered with more and more confidence, surprised by how easily I could talk about my work when the questions were real. Ethan moved through the crowd smoothly, but I noticed him coming back to my corner every so often, introducing me to certain guests, jumping in when conversations got too personal. By the end of the night, 2 of my paintings had sold, the fishing boats and the rainy promenade. "Successful debut," Ethan said as he handed me a glass of water after the last guest departed. "How do you feel?" "Drained, exhilarated." I accepted the water gratefully. I didn't expect people to actually buy them. "Art is communication. Yours speaks clearly." He sat across from me, his own glass untouched. "Will you bring more work next month? We have a space opening in the main gallery." That night marked the beginning of a pattern. I delivered new paintings every few weeks. Ethan provided feedback, never flattery, always insight. Sometimes we disagreed about a composition or color choice, the discussion stretching for hours. I found myself looking forward to these conversations, to having my work challenged rather than simply praised. July brought a heat wave that turned Portland into a shimmering mirage. The diner filled with tourists, seeking air conditioning and cold drinks. I worked shorter shifts to make room for my increasing commissions, with Kelly backing me up the whole time. "Your gallery man was in again today," she mentioned one afternoon as I hung up my apron. "Asked if you were working." "He's not my gallery man," I corrected, though a flush crept up my neck. "He's just interested in my work." Kelly snorted. "Sure, that's why he orders the special 3 times a week even though he clearly hates meatloaf." I brushed off her jokes, but Ethan did come around more often, stopping by the diner during my shifts, hanging around after gallery drop-offs, telling me about books or exhibits I might like. We started talking about more than just art, music, books, places we'd been. He told me about working in New York at bigger galleries before coming back to Maine to open his own. I told him bits about my life in Chicago, leaving out anything about Noah or Madison. One Sunday afternoon in late July, I showed up at the gallery with a new painting, but the doors were locked. A note stuck to the glass said, "Around back, E." I walked down the small alley behind the building to a red door held open with a brick. The room inside was huge, with big skylights letting in tons of light. There were unfinished paintings everywhere, tables full of art supplies and bookshelves covering the walls. Ethan was at a workbench, mixing colors. He looked up when I came in with a blue smudge on his arm. "Sorry for the mystery, I'm closed on Sundays." He gestured to the space around us. "This is where the real work happens." I walked slowly around the studio, checking out the messy but organized workspace. Brushes soaking in jars, palette knives lined up by size, reference books left open. This was a real working space, nothing like the spotless gallery. "I didn't know you painted," I said, examining a large canvas leaning against the wall, an abstract study in blues and greens that reminded me of water in motion. "Former life. Now I mostly help other artists." He wiped his hands on a cloth. "I noticed you've been experimenting with acrylics. Ever tried oils?" "Not really. They intimidate me." "They're worth the learning curve." He crossed to a cabinet and pulled out several tubes. The richness of color, the blending possibilities. He arranged the tubes on a nearby table. "Stay. Try them. I work here Sundays when the gallery's closed. The space is yours to use if you want." I hesitated, torn between eagerness to try new materials and the unforeseen intimacy of sharing a workspace. "I wouldn't be in your way. I've been working alone too long." He shrugged. "Sometimes creativity needs company." That Sunday turned into others. I arrived early, canvas in hand, to find coffee brewing and light filling the space. We worked quietly together, sometimes talking to share thoughts or ask questions. Ethan showed me oil techniques, how to layer colors for depth, how to work with the longer drying time, how to clean brushes properly. With his help, my paintings got better. August brought cooler evenings and new routines. Coffee after painting sessions, walks along the Eastern Promenade when we needed breaks, talks about books and music that went on after dark, so we'd turn on lamps and make more tea. Ethan wasn't like anyone I'd known in Chicago. He didn't talk just to fill space, and he really listened without pushing for anything. One evening, as we closed the studio after a long painting session, Ethan paused at the door. "Would you like to have dinner sometime?" The question hung in the air between us. Not here, not with paint under our fingernails. I froze up right away. Dinner meant more than coffee or walks. Dinner felt like it had more weight to it, like it could lead somewhere risky. I thought about Noah, our last dinner before I found those texts, how charming he seemed, how much I trusted him. Ethan looked at my face, studying me the way he looked at paintings. "Just dinner," he said quietly. "That's all." "Okay," I heard myself say, surprising us both. "Just dinner." We met the following Friday at a small restaurant near the harbor. The water looked pretty in the sunset light with boats bobbing around. Ethan had on a blue button-down shirt, and his dark hair was a little wet like he'd just showered. I spent way too much time picking out my green dress. The restaurant was quiet with tablecloths, candles, and music playing under people talking. We got seafood and wine, which felt fancy compared to our usual coffee and snacks at the studio. Halfway through dinner, something changed. Maybe it was the wine or the candles or just that we'd known each other for months. Whatever it was, I started telling Ethan about Chicago. I was engaged. The words emerged suddenly, between discussions of a local exhibition and plans for the gallery's fall showcase. "That's why I came to Portland. I left someone." Ethan set down his glass, his expression unchanging. "I suspected something like that. He was sleeping with my sister." The sentence still carried weight, but less than it once had. "For months, while we were planning our wedding." I told him everything, finding the texts, the arguments, my decision to leave, the pawn shop in Portland, and the apartment above the bookstore. Ethan just listened without cutting me off, paying attention the whole time without looking shocked or sorry for me. When I finished, he stayed quiet for a bit. Then he said, "They lost someone exceptional." Not "I'm sorry" or "how terrible" or any empty comfort words. He just made it clear that them losing me was their problem, not mine. We stayed at the restaurant so long we didn't realize they were closing until we noticed all the empty tables and dim lights. When he walked me home, Ethan kept some space between us with his hands in his pockets. At my door he said, "Thanks for dinner, and for telling me your story. Thank you for listening." And for not saying I deserved better or that everything happens for a reason. People say those things for themselves, not for you. He smiled slightly. Good night, Olivia. As summer turned to fall, Portland's trees turned red and gold. The harbor waters got darker blue, with more whitecaps as the winds picked up. The tourists left, and locals took back their city. The gallery got ready for the holiday season, with Ethan putting together a special exhibition of Maine artists. Our relationship moved forward at Ethan's usual slow pace. More dinners, a concert at the local arts center, a day trip to a coastal town to check out a famous sculptor's studio. I wasn't sure what we were building yet. We started a Sunday routine, painting in the morning at the studio, lunch at a nearby cafe, and walking around the city or checking out museums in the afternoon. Ethan never pushed me for more. When our hands touched while reaching for the same paint tube, we both let it last a little longer. October brought my best show so far, a bunch of oil paintings of Portland through the seasons. The gallery was packed on opening night, my name showed up in the local arts section, and collectors asked about commissions. Standing next to Ethan looking at the crowd, I felt proud and kind of shocked at the same time. Did you ever imagine this 6 months ago? He asked. I couldn't imagine next week 6 months ago, I admitted. I was just trying to survive each day. His hand found mine in the crowd, fingers intertwining without hesitation. And now I find myself looking forward. The phrase summed up what I'd been feeling since that first day in the gallery, not just getting over being cheated on, but actually feeling excited about what might come next. I wasn't ready to call it love, whatever this was I felt when I was with Ethan. It was too new, too shaky to slap such a big label on, but it felt like having a chance again, something I'd given up on months ago. Later that night, after everyone had left the gallery and we sat there with my paintings and empty wine glasses, Ethan asked what I was doing for winter. The light changes, he said. Shorter days, different colors, your work will change with it. Is that good or bad? Neither, just different. He looked at me thoughtfully. Change is how we know we're still alive. I thought about all the changes over the last year, finding out that awful truth, taking the midnight train from Chicago, getting the small apartment, working at the diner, picking up my paints again, showing at the gallery, meeting Ethan. My life had completely fallen apart and I'd built a whole new one. I never thanked you, I said. For what? For seeing something in my work, for giving me space here, I hesitated, searching for words that encompassed everything without saying too much. For making room for me. You did the work, he replied. All of it. The painting, the healing, the showing up. I just opened a door. As we locked up the gallery, the October wind brought the smell of wood smoke and fallen leaves. Street lamps lit up the early darkness. The harbor bell clanged in the distance, marking the hour. Ethan walked me home as he always did, our pace slow in the cold weather. At my door, he waited while I found my keys. When I turned to say goodnight, something had changed in his expression, a certainty that wasn't there before. I'm not him, he said quietly. I won't promise never to hurt you. That's not something anyone can honestly promise. But I can promise to be exactly who I am, nothing more or less. I looked at him in the half-light by the door, at his serious eyes behind those black-rimmed glasses, at the gentle set of his mouth, at the guy who had become so important to me without ever asking for anything in return. I know who you are, I said. That's why I'm here. He leaned forward slowly, giving me every opportunity to step away. Instead, I moved closer, meeting him halfway. Our kiss was brief, hesitant, more like a question than a statement. When we pulled apart, his smile had that same quiet confidence I'd seen moments before. Good night, Olivia. Good night, Ethan. I watched him walk away down the street until he disappeared under the streetlights. My apartment looked the same as always. Canvases against walls, brushes in jars, books on tables. But something felt different. The place didn't feel like just a hideout anymore. It felt more like somewhere to start from. I went to the window and looked at the October night. 6 months ago, I stood at this same window, still hurt from being cheated on, too scared to think about what came next. Now things were different, not perfect or finished, but I could see good possibilities ahead. In the morning, I would begin a new painting. The call came on a snowy December morning. I was at the easel in Ethan's studio working on a new commission when my phone buzzed beside me. The number had a Chicago area code. I almost didn't answer. My father's voice sounded thin, distant. "Olivia? It's your mother? She's gone." The paintbrush slipped from my fingers, leaving a streak of blue across the canvas. His words didn't make sense at first. Then they hit me hard and I felt cold all over. "When?" I managed. "Last night, in her sleep. Heart attack." Each phrase came out clipped, mechanical. "The funeral's on Friday." Friday. 3 days away. The canvas before me blurred. "I'll be there," I said. After hanging up, I sat motionless, the ruined painting forgotten. Ethan found me like that when he returned from the gallery, still holding the phone, surrounded by drying paint. He didn't ask questions, just knelt beside my chair and waited. "My mother died," I said finally. The words felt strange on my tongue, unreal. "I need to go back to Chicago." He nodded, his hand warm on mine. "When do we leave?" "We?" "Unless you prefer to go alone," he said, his voice careful, neutral. I looked at him, really looked, at the man who had become central to my life in just a few months. Since our first kiss in October, we'd settled into a relationship that felt nothing like what I'd had with Noah. No grand declarations, no rush toward definitive labels, just steady presence, genuine interest, growing trust. "No," I said. "I don't want to go alone." That night, as I packed a small suitcase, reality sank in. I was returning to Chicago, to the place I'd run from, to face not just my mother's death but everything I'd left behind. Madison, Noah, the mess of my former life. "What am I going to say to them?" I asked, folding a black dress into the suitcase. Ethan sat on the edge of my bed watching me pack. "Whatever feels right in the moment. Nothing feels right about this." "Then say nothing." He reached for my hand, stopping my nervous folding. "You're going for your mother, not for them." Our flight left early the next morning. Portland's airport was quiet in the dark with only fluorescent lights and the noise of coffee machines. I went through security in a daze with Ethan beside me. On the plane, I stared out the window at clouds and remembered my mother, her hands always busy with knitting or cooking, her habit of singing softly when she thought no one was listening, the way she'd call on Sunday evenings just to check in, even after I'd moved to Portland and changed my number. I'd answered those calls with increasing warmth over the months, our conversations careful but real. Now there would be no more calls. When we landed in Chicago, I saw the whole city below us. Buildings and streets I knew right away, landmarks I could name without trying. Snow was everywhere, making all the sharp edges look soft. "It looks different," I said as our taxi crawled through traffic. "How?" Ethan asked. I pressed my forehead against the cold window. "Smaller." We checked into a hotel downtown, dropping our bags before heading to my parents' house in Lincoln Park. The house looked exactly as I remembered. 3 stories of red brick with white trim, a wreath on the door. I hesitated on the sidewalk, snow seeping through my boots. "I haven't been here since before." I trailed off. Ethan squeezed my hand. "I'm right here." My father opened the door before I could knock. He'd aged years in the 11 months since I'd seen him, his face drawn, new lines around his mouth. We stood awkwardly for a second before he pulled me into a stiff hug. "You came," he said, his voice rough. "Of course I came." He released me, noticing Ethan for the first time. "Who's this?" "This is Ethan," I said. "Ethan, my father." The house smelled of flowers and coffee and something else absence. Too many people filled the living room, relatives, neighbors, church friends, but the space felt empty. I moved through them in a fog, accepting condolences, answering questions about Portland with automatic responses. "Such a lovely surprise, you bringing someone," my aunt whispered, eyeing Ethan across the room. "Your mother would have been pleased." I nodded, not able to say anything. Would she have been pleased? I'd never know. There were too many conversations we'd never finished, too many things left unsaid. The funeral took place the next day at the church where I'd grown up, the same church where I was supposed to have gotten married. Snow fell steadily throughout the service, muffling sounds, covering cars and headstones. I sat between my father and Ethan, aware of eyes on my back, wondering if Madison and Noah were among them. I didn't see them until the reception, held at my parents' house. I was arranging food trays in the dining room when movement in the doorway caught my eye. Madison stood there, thin and hollow-eyed, wearing a black dress that hung loose on her frame. Noah stood behind her, his hand not touching her back, He wasn't wearing his wedding ring. Our eyes met across the room. No one moved. Then Madison stepped forward, her expression hard to read. "Liv," she said, the childhood nickname strange after so much distance. "I'm sorry about Mom." I nodded, my throat tight. Up close, the changes in her were even more obvious. Cheekbones too sharp, dark circles under her eyes, a nervous habit of touching her neck that I didn't recognize. "Thank you for coming," I managed. Noah stayed where he was, his eyes on the floor. He looked up only when my father entered the room, saying something about needing more ice. The moment broke. Madison moved away, helping an old aunt to a chair. Noah disappeared into the crowd. I escaped to the kitchen, saying I needed to refill water pitchers. The kitchen hit me hard. I grabbed the edge of the sink, taking deep breaths. The door swung open behind me. Madison stepped in, closing it quietly. "Can we talk?" she asked. I turned, water still running in the sink. "About what?" "Everything." She leaned against the counter, arms crossed protectively over her chest. "Noah and I, we're separating." I turned off the faucet. We both stood there, saying nothing. "We've been miserable since you left," she continued, her voice flat. "The affair, it burned out fast once we got married. Noah blames me for losing you. I resent being the villain in everyone's eyes. We stayed together out of guilt, appearances." She shrugged. "It doesn't matter now. I should have felt good about it, like I'd been proven right, the way their betrayal came back to bite them. But instead I just felt free, like I could finally let go of all that anger." "I'm sorry," I said, surprising us both. Madison's eyes widened. "You're sorry after what we did? Not for what you did, for what you're going through now." I looked at her, really looked, past the hollow cheeks and tired eyes, at the sister I'd grown up with, fought with, loved. "It must be hard." Tears filled her eyes. "I miss you, Liv. I know I don't deserve to, but I do." I didn't say I missed her too, though part of me did. I didn't offer forgiveness or reconciliation. Some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt, at least not into what they were before. But standing in our mother's kitchen, I realized the anger that had driven me from Chicago had changed into something else. Not acceptance, exactly, but perspective. "I need to get back to the guests," I said finally. Madison nodded, wiping her eyes. As I reached for the door, she asked, "Are you happy? In Portland?" I thought of my apartment above the bookstore, my paintings in the gallery, the diner where I still worked a few shifts each week. I thought of Ethan waiting in the next room, patient and steady. "Yes," I said. "I am." The rest of the day passed in a blur of conversations and memories. I introduced Ethan to old friends, watching their curious looks, their attempts to fit him into what they knew of my past. He handled these conversations well, paying attention but not trying too hard or being too quiet. I ran into Noah on the back porch later that evening. He was smoking a cigarette, a habit he'd told everyone he quit years ago. He jumped when I stepped outside, nearly dropping the cigarette in the snow. "I was just leaving," he said quickly. "It's fine." I wrapped my arms around myself against the cold. "It's a lot in there." He nodded, not meeting my eyes. We stood in awkward silence, breath fogging in the winter air. "Madison told me you're separating," I said finally. "Yeah." He tapped ash into the snow. "It's been over for a while, really." I waited, wondering if he would apologize, offer explanations, ask for something. He did none of those things, just finished his cigarette and stamped it out carefully. "Your mom was always good to me," he said. "She liked you." "I know." He glanced at me, then away. "The guy you brought, he seems decent." "He is." Another silence stretched between us, not comfortable but not as tense as I would have expected a year ago. Finally, Noah squared his shoulders, a move so familiar it brought back old memories. "I should head back in. The roads will be bad with all this snow." I nodded. Before he reached the door, I said, "Noah." He turned. "Take care of yourself." Something flickered across his face. Relief, perhaps, or resignation. He nodded once and went inside. Later that night, after most guests had left, I found my father in his study looking at old photo albums. I sat beside him on the old leather couch that's been in this room forever. "She kept all your newspaper clippings," he said, pointing to a page where my mother had carefully preserved reviews of my early art shows in Chicago, before my corporate job had taken precedence. "And these came recently." He turned the page to reveal printouts of articles from Portland's local paper, mentioning my gallery showings. My throat got tight. She saw those? She followed everything you did. He closed the album gently. She was proud of you, Olivia. She understood why you left. I leaned my head against his shoulder for the first time since I was a kid. He smelled like aftershave and coffee, which was comforting. I like your young man, he said after a while. He watches you like you're the most interesting thing in the room. He's a good person. I can tell. He patted my hand. Your mother would have liked him too. The next day, with a few hours before our flight, I showed Ethan around my old neighborhood. We checked out the park where I'd spent my summers, the coffee shop I studied at during college, and the small gallery that displayed my first painting. Being back in my old city felt weird. I knew every corner of it, but somehow it didn't feel like home anymore. You grew up here, Ethan noted as we walked along the lakeshore, snow crunching under our boots. But you don't belong here anymore. I watched gulls wheel over the frozen harbor. No, I don't. Do you regret leaving? I considered the question carefully. I regret what made me leave, but not the leaving itself. I looked at him. If I hadn't left, I wouldn't have found myself again. Or met you. He smiled, which made his serious face look softer. Silver linings. Something like that. Back in Portland, winter had settled in fully short days, long nights, the harbor sometimes frozen near the edges. I resumed my routines, painting, gallery showings, occasional shifts at the diner. But something had changed inside me after the funeral. The tension I'd carried for so long, the fear of being found or followed, had disappeared. I began a new series of paintings, not about pain or betrayal or even healing, but about hope. Landscapes bathed in dawn light, the harbor in spring, doorways opening to unexpected gardens. I painted with such focus that even Ethan was surprised, and he'd seen me paint through pretty much every mood possible. These are different, he said one evening as we stood in his studio, examining my latest work. Lighter. I nodded, looking at the painting we made of Portland's harbor at sunrise with boats and a bright sky. I feel lighter. January brought a blizzard that shut down the city for 3 days. Ethan and I stayed in my apartment above the closed bookstore the whole time. We cooked good food, read to each other, and painted together while snow built up on the windows. On the third night, we sat wrapped in blankets, watching the storm when Ethan gave me that look he gets right before saying something important. What would you think about us living together? He asked. Not immediately, but when my lease ends in March. The question didn't really surprise me. We already spent most nights together, either at his place or mine. Our routines had mixed together over the months, morning coffee, evening walks, painting sessions that turned into dinner. Still, being officially asked to move in was a step I hadn't taken since Noah. Where would we live? I asked. I thought maybe here. You love this apartment, the light, being above the bookstore. He gestured to the paintings stacked against the walls. But we could find something new if you'd prefer, a fresh start. I looked around the space that had sheltered me when I'd arrived in Portland with nothing but determination and spite. The apartment had changed along with me, from empty walls to a colorful home. It had seen me at my worst, but also as I slowly got better. Here, I said. I'd like us to live here. Ethan's smile spread slowly. Are you sure? I nodded. Yes. The certainty in my voice surprised even me. No hesitation, no doubt. Just a simple decision. That night, looking out at the winter sky from our soon-to-be shared apartment, I felt like I'd built something new from what was left of my old life. The pain that made me leave Chicago was still there. Life isn't that simple, but now it was just a part of me instead of everything. My mother's death made me face what I'd left behind. Seeing Madison and Noah had finally let me let go of my anger. Not because I'd been right all along, but because it just didn't matter anymore. The snow continued to fall outside my window. Tomorrow, I would paint it. The colors, the texture, the way it covered everything. Tonight, I just watched, listening to Ethan's steady breathing beside me, feeling calm and hopeful.